Hi everybody, welcome to our first episode of Life in Data. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Akon Dey. He's not just a technology leader and a data evangelist, but also a former CEO of Dgraph. Dr. Dey has over 30 years of experience in R&D, building cutting-edge technologies across the United States, Australia, and India. From OLTP to OLAP systems to real-life cloud infrastructure and big data analytics, his work has shaped how organizations manage and leverage data at scale. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and I'm so honored to have you here today.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for taking the time to speak with me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to asking you a lot of questions and looking forward to learning more about life and data from your perspective.
Thank you. Glad to share.
Wanted to start at the beginning and where you began getting interested in technology and IT.
So growing up, I was a very curious child. I asked my father so many questions that my mother would actually ask me to stop speaking to him because he was just back from work and tired. But I just couldn't stop with my questions. And my dad was, eager to answer those questions. So it started very early. So I was very eager to learn about everything, like anything, and especially technology and science. But what really got me into computer science was an exchange teacher came in from Wales, Dr. Maud, and he brought along with him a small ZX Spectrum. If you remember, it was about that big. And so me and my friends, we got together and we got access to that machine, and we typed in the entire Hobbit game before we knew what Hobbit was and who J.R.R. Tolkien's was and things like that. But we ended up keying in that entire game by hand, keystroke by keystroke, painstakingly, and then played the game. And the joy of watching what you had created or what you had entered take shape on a computer was just exciting. And so, eventually, even though it was something I was so excited about, even though it wasn't my first choice as a career, I would have liked to do something else, but that's what got me into computer science, and it's always been that excitement of creating something that's kept me going.
Where was this?
So I grew up in India. I grew up in a small town called Panchgani. It's a small town in Western India, close to the city of Pune.
Okay.
On the Eastern Ghats. And it's a small hill town where it's actually semi-rural, but it's also a magnet for a lot of people from around the world. So, for instance, I had people from 45 countries in our school. So we had people from.
That's really diverse. That was what, elementary school or
Because so it's, we call it middle. I think it's middle school
middle
because I
school?
think grade 6, I believe.
Okay.
I think
So from middle school, where did you go from there?
so. I studied in until grade 10. I studied in this town, and then we had a pretty sad situation, and I had to actually for grade 11 and 12 we had to actually travel every day for about like an hour and a half each way
Oh,
to
wow.
go to a junior college to complete my grade 12. And then after that I left for college, and I did college at in University of Pune, which is in Pune. And after that, I went and worked at IIT Bombay in the computer science department as a research assistant for about a year and a half, or no, but 2.5 years.
Okay.
But during that time, I also completed my postgraduate diploma. So I was doing postgraduate diploma during that time as well. So I did my undergrad in computer science at Pune, University of Pune, and then I did I did a postgraduate diploma at NCST, which is a government of India organization, which was known for its work in what's called the ERNet, or the Education and Research Net, one
Okay.
of the first networks in India.
What triggered or what was the catalyst for you to come to the United States?
Well, I think everybody, the salary differences are so much. Just to give you an example,
Yeah.
my first salary was 1,200 Indian rupees per month,
Oh wow.
which is
Okay.
which is literally $30.
Yeah.
So that was my first job, and it was just as enjoyable as any other job I've had. Probably the most enjoyable job I had. But the economics of the situation was that you had to leave the country in order to do something where you basically to get to a point where you are financially, you know, uh, like you are going to put 8 hours a day, let's say,
Sure.
might as well paid well enough
Yeah,
for
might as
doing.
well take the risk and go somewhere where you can get paid more. Yeah.
But also the US is where, the IT industry has been, computer science has been it's been at the forefront of computer science and technology for the better part of the last 100 years, right?
Okay.
And so it made sense for me to come here.
So it wasn't just the economics, but it was also
Yeah, the
the
place to
being able to be exposed to more technology, I guess, or Silicon Valley, I guess. Okay.
yes. But also I ended up joining a company which actually got me into databases and database internals. It was an object database company called Versant, which I believe is still around.
Hmm.
The product is still around. So I did some really good work there, and I learned a lot, more importantly. And I got into the internals of databases and understanding databases really well. And that's what got me into the database space.
Okay. Then I know, so you came to the US, and I know you did your doctorate in Sydney, right?
Yes,
So I want to know, well, what took you from the US to, beautiful Australia?
USCIS. Essentially, what happened was after working so many years, I went through this immigration process, and an immigration lawyer said that, we can't file your green card under a particular category called EB2 because you do not have a master's degree. And so I said, okay. And he said that in order to be in EB2, you'd have to at least have a master's degree. And so I said, well, okay, then I'll go and get a PhD. And so I said, what do I do? How do I do, how do I do that?
Right.
And so I thought about all kinds of ways.
So that's
Uh,
interesting because not many a lot of people would be hit with this wall in front of you, just saying, okay, here, you need a master's degree now. Okay, great. Now where do I find the time? Where do I get the money? And how do I go for that? And you just decided, okay, that's fine. That's easy enough. You make it sound so easy.
well, no, I mean, you gotta put, well, it's not easy. It's not about easy. It's about alternate solutions to problems. So it's like people
That's
think
funny you say that.
there's
Yeah.
one way to do it, right?
Right.
And I have always tried, my solutions to problems are usually a little bit off, in the sense that I will find things that other people may not think about, or
Yeah.
it may seem odd for someone to do something like this. Like somebody else would have done something else, I believe, some easy, maybe an easier path,
But
right?
this is interesting because it that tends to build innovation, right? That type of
Right.
thing, that type of
But
thinking.
that's the beauty about innovation, right?
Yeah.
And um, like there is a degree of innocence in things when you do not know about, that you innovate in unique ways when you don't have the knowledge. So you see kids, they
Yeah.
will innovate in ways which you would have never thought, because hey, you can't put this Lego piece on top of that Lego
Yeah.
piece, something of that sort. But they will do it, and they will try it, and they
Yeah.
will. So this was my naivety first, that got me into this. But it's a happy, in the end I completed it, but also I ended up growing in so many ways.
Yeah.
That experience was life changing. I met great people in Australia. I eventually became an Australian citizen. Um, I was honored. It's been an absolute, honor to have completed my PhD under Alan Fekete, who's well known, one of the top people in the database transaction space. So, you know, it's great I did it.
But I would love to for you to dive deeper into like your experience in Australia.
So I had been to Australia just for one day
Yeah.
before that. I
Just
just
one day.
just one day. So
Okay.
essentially, while going to India for vacation, we stopped over in Singapore,
Yep.
uh, went flew to Sydney, spent 24 hours in Sydney, and came back. This was because I had to get my permanent residence evidenced. Because we were naive and we were young, we just basically walked the city. And so I still remember crossing the Sydney Harbour Bridge,
Yep.
cross the whole Harbour Bridge, and people are looking at us as though like, what way, and so yeah, so I liked the place, and I said, well, we just go there,
Yeah.
and decided to go. And but Sydney was it 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 took a while to settle in because so like we didn't know where to live. So I
Yeah.
said, okay, why not we live in the city? So if since Sydney, we ended up living near King's Cross and at Potts Point.
Oh wow. Okay.
Okay, so
King's Cross.
that's not a place you would pick
No,
if
you
you
wouldn't.
so
Yeah.
we picked
Yeah.
Potts Point. Is it no is it,
Potts Point's nice though.
yeah, Potts Point's nice.
King's
But Potts
Cross is a
Point
bit too much
Potts
partying.
Point is just 200 feet away from King's Cross,
It is, yeah.
which is where you don't want to be, right?
Yeah.
But we ended up living in Potts Point for the first few weeks. So I was still working for, and when I moved to Sydney, and I used to walk to work
Yeah.
on these days, and it's not a small walk, it's not a short walk.
It's about a 35-minute, 40-minute walk because you're coming from King's Cross, you got to go all the way down to the city. Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite a walk,
But it's
and
still
so
a
I
nice it's still a nice walk. I mean, it's Sydney,
yeah,
so
yeah, you go to the botanical garden
yeah,
and stuff like that. So it's a
it's
beautiful
amazing. Yeah.
walk.
And go through what is it, St. Mary's Cathedral. You walk
Yeah, all
past
that,
that. Yeah.
all that.
Yeah. It's
It's
amazing.
a very nice place. So it's a really walkable, nice city, and so I really loved it. And my wife was not particularly well at that time. She'd gone through some, health scare.
Yeah.
But um, you know, and but she was like the care she'd received in Australia was what really what was really, really great about, that's how a medical system should work. Like, kind of the kind of dedication that the doctor showed. Like there's a doctor who lived who had a practice down the street. And the first time we went there and we called him and we said, can we get an appointment? I said, my wife is not well, and can you come and take a look at her? The guy came to our home.
Oh
It
well.
never Yeah, so that kind of said, hey, a doctor coming to your home to take a look at you to make sure that you're okay. I said, that's something. And
Yeah.
so, it was very, I liked Australia very much.
Yeah.
And I felt comfortable just, even before I reached there. So
Yeah.
it's a very nice place. Yeah.
And then you studied there for how many years were you there?
My PhD took about 7 years because
Okay.
I did it part-time. So it took about 7 years
Yeah. And you were working at the same time.
working at the same time.
And was your wife's condition like long term or was it short term and she got better and
She got better, and
okay.
eventually it stabilized, and they took really good care of her. And um, yeah, so we were lucky actually, because while
That's
she was here, uh, they weren't able to figure it out.
yeah.
They weren't able to figure out what was wrong with her, and how. But eventually, they did find what the issue was, and she was taken care of.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I find that the healthcare system there is pretty good.
Well,
Very,
it's for the people.
it's for the people, you said? Yeah,
That's it.
yes. You came up with this concept called Cherry Garcia.
Yeah.
And I want to know what prompted the name Cherry Garcia and how did you come up with this idea and what were some of the struggles or challenges of
Yeah.
going for your PhD?
Well, I'll start with what were the struggles of going for the PhD. So essentially, it wasn't so much of a struggle, honestly,
Okay.
in the sense that Australia makes it easy for you to be able to do further studies.
Okay.
You also, I believe, you are encouraged by the tax system to go in, and so you could take, like if you take a course at the university, you can offset that against your income.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
you get a tax break for it. So you're incentivized to study, which is why a lot of people do further studies in Australia
I,
while
I I think it's also a fraction of the cost of US schools currently. Yeah.
fraction of the cost and the quality is great,
Yeah.
right? There are a lot of good universities
Yeah.
in Australia. The other thing was the classes for master's students and postgraduate students is in the evenings. So it actually works with your schedule.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. So it
That
was a
makes
no
sense.
it was a no-brainer. Like,
Yeah.
I get a tax break. It's at a schedule. We didn't have children. So, we were both able to complete so my wife went in and she finished her CPA eventually, from CPA Australia.
Yeah.
And I got my PhD, but we did it while working full time. And it didn't affect us because, we struggled to the first few years. We didn't have enough time and it was really, really busy. But we were able to, and it didn't break the bank. We had there was no, I mean, that's why I think that's the way to do it. It's well done. They
Yeah.
have they fixed it. They made it possible for people to do it. And I think that's a great thing, right? Um, how did I come up with the problem? Well, so I worked, I was the architect for a system called,
Yeah.
which basically took data from all the front end hosts and brought it into the backend warehouse, where we did other, we did all the data science that did, and ad systems and things like that worked off of that data. But essentially what we had to do is we had to put uh, a piece of software on every single machine deployed
Yeah.
in its data. And so when we made configuration changes, our operations folks used to have to coordinate with every single other, you know, other 52, there are 52 different groups we had to work with
Yeah.
in order to get something out there. It was really painful. So I had this idea that, maybe we could push config. And this is well before, Kubernetes and
Yeah.
all these kind of things. This is well before that. So, there was no real nice way to be able to push changes without. So I had this thing that I kept playing with this in my mind. How could I get a consistent configuration chain pushed out across 200,000 machines?
Yeah.
And how could I do it so that if it failed, everything recovered, and if it succeeded, then it was all active at the same time.
That's pretty, that's a pretty challenging problem for back
Yes,
then,
it
before the
is a challenging
middleware
problem.
existed to do that. Yeah.
Correct. So that's where it started. And so that's why I said, so if I had to put 200,000 machines out there, and if I had to make this one change, what would it take to do it? And so I started thinking about that problem. And that's how this came up. The other thing was I had actually rewritten, well, we had a transaction manager and we had an XA transaction, we had an XA interface, the XOpen XA interface, the distributed transaction. So it was a resource manager for a distributed transaction system. And so I had rewritten that entire transaction management piece without changing. I rewrote things without changing the interfaces to it.
Yeah.
So I kind of redone the wiring inside the transaction management system without changing the interface for.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I had this experience with transaction management and distributed transactions. And so I took those two things, and Alan was an expert in transactions. And I thought
Yeah.
that, I should work in this space.
You mention your professor a lot, and it seems like you had a really close relationship.
So first of all, If it wasn't for Alan Fekete, I would not have a PhD.
Okay.
Okay. So he was kind enough to take me on. It's a risk, right? Because of the way the Australian PhD system works also differently, right? The university gets paid only when you graduate. So the
Okay.
Australian Research Council, so the funding is slightly different. In the US, the professor gets the funding, and then he kind of hires PhD students. In Australia, it's different. You, as a PhD student, get a grant to do a PhD at a university under a supervisor and a co-supervisor,
Okay.
right? And you are given the grant. So if you don't complete it, then the university doesn't get paid.
Okay.
So it's in the interest of everybody that it
Yep.
get done. But so it's actually I think it's a good system. I like the system. Uh, I mean, I wish other people did it in other places. I don't know if other people do it, but the way, and so he took a huge risk by taking me as a student because it was, his time and things like that. Uh, and so, I'm perpetually indebted to him for that because he could have easily said, "Oh, it's a high risk for me. It's a waste of my time." It could be a potentially waste of his time, right? Um, and so, Alan was kind enough to take me as a student, and you know, initially it was difficult because I wasn't aware of what were the requirements. I wasn't familiar with what were the requirements for publishing and things like that. And if you don't publish, you don't meet the requirements for completing your PhD, right?
Yep.
One of the requirements is that you publish, and there's a minimum requirement. You need to have, there are venues like journals and conferences which are rated according to, so you have to at least have a few at the top rate conferences and journals. So it's quite a bit of work to be done. And being a being in full-time employment, it's not so easy,
Yeah.
right? Because there are deadlines and things like that. You have to produce material worth publishing, and so it was quite a bit of pressure. But his support and Uwe, who is my co-supervisor, was also very helpful. So Uwe Rome complimented Alan Fekete for um, uh, and both of them helped me. And then there were other people in the system as well. Like there's a gentleman named Michael Carl, who's Alan's student as well. He did some phenomenal work as well. And so he was there, and then there were a bunch of other folks. Hyung Soo Jung was there, who's now a professor at a Korean university, and there were a bunch of others who were there in that research group that we had. And with their support and with Alan's support, I was able to do this. But uh, uh, I think without, so which there's a thing that I'd like to say is that it's important to finish it. And once what happens in a lot of PhD students is you have some other like maybe you have a job offer, or you haven't made enough publications. You're not sure whether you look back on your research and say, is this really worth it? There's a lot of soul searching that goes on. And you just have to push through it, get it done. But also there's a lot of self-doubt, and it happens to everyone. If you're you know a lot of people in the top universities may not feel it that way because they're working with a top professor, and um, you know maybe they're on a project that publishing is easy.
Yeah.
uh, Sometimes when especially my topic was not particularly easy to publish in, right? So it can make you it can bring self-doubt into your mind, and it's important to you know
Yeah.
persevere, get it done, because at the end of the day, once you're done with it, it gives you a sense of achievement that you know is second to none.
Yeah. It also sounds like you had a really good support system there
Yeah,
to
it's
finish it.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
could imagine some challenges that some PhD students might have where not everybody is in agreement with what they're doing, but then it's still important to go through the whole process and get it. Because I think we discussed this before, which is, it's a legacy that you have that you could always own. And I guess one of the other questions that I would have, because you have a PhD is, hey, if you want to ever get into academics and teach, that's also that opens up an avenue as well. But yeah,
It does. But I mean, the PhDs, I mean, there are two sides to this, right? I mean, there is something that you learn in the PhD process that's important to kind of highlight here, is that it's not just first of all, obviously you learn to do research, okay? You learn to critique other people's work. You learn to basically it's also a very humbling experience because when you look at the work that other people have done before you in the space that you are supposed to become an expert in and you are the expert in, you realize that you couldn't have gotten where you are without all the work that's gone in. So by
I,
doing all your research, by doing your groundwork for your thesis, you end up reading a lot. You know, I'll tell you, it used to take me hours to read a 12-page paper when I
yeah,
started.
yeah.
But I had difficulty reading technical papers. But soon, like in a year, you get to the point where you can now read papers really quickly. Like, uh,
It's for me, I don't have a PhD, but it's extremely humbling when you ask, "Hey, you wrote that article, can I review it?" Or Hero, our CTO, who
yeah,
you know very well, when he basically says, "Okay, yeah, send me your Google Doc and I'll review it." And of course, it comes back redlined, right? And it's an extremely humbling experience because you know how much you don't know,
yeah,
and then sending it to an expert that knows what you know. Yeah,
true. And see that, I mean, the like a paper review process, right?
yeah,
If somebody reviews your paper and you make a claim in the paper or you make a statement in the paper and somebody says that, okay, this is not true, and
yeah,
they give evidence of that, or this is, or argue against your case,
yeah,
and they give you evidence from four different
yeah,
sources. It gets you thinking. So it's like it is a it's a really growing experience.
yeah,
And but also in most academic circles are very it's very formal and very respectful because you're working with people around the world. Most people are very respectful, and it's not just the older people. You'd be surprised, some of the young folks are really really sharp,
yeah,
right?
I'm sure.
And and they can come up and give you some really good ideas. Sometimes they give you very good arguments, and so I mean it's a good learning growing experience. And I think anybody who's inclined to be you know uh, academically inclined, they should try to do it. I say it's at some point in their life they should consider doing it. Maybe even if it's not too early in life, maybe not just after your undergrad, because you can go and do a PhD after your undergrad.
Yeah,
Maybe take a break, go take do some work, find your passion and see that, and then go back to doing a PhD.
yeah, that's some good advice. I mean, it gives you something lasting.
Yeah, but it'll change your life as well. It'll change you in ways you didn't expect it to.
No, I'm sure. Yeah. So, so from what we were discussing earlier was Cherry Garcia and the paper you created, which became the idea behind Scalar. I would love to know. Cherry Garcia is such a unique name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we were so there was a former student of the University of Sydney, James Cowling, and James was doing his PhD at MIT CSAIL, and he came and gave us a talk, and he was doing something similar. It was in the area of transactions, distributed transactions, Um, and so he gave a talk and he mentioned that the name of his protocol was called Chunky Spread. He was Chunky Spread.
Yeah.
So it got me thinking, and I said, "Hey, why did you call it chunky spread?" And he gave me some answer. He said something like, "There's somebody who had something else, so he said this is not that. This is the spread with small chunks in it or something of that sort." So I said, he said that's how called it chunky spread. I said, "Oh, okay." And so I was thinking about what to call my work because I'd already come up with this thing and I had the protocol in my mind and I'd implemented it and I had started seeing good results. And so I said, well, these are not vanilla transactions. These are more than just vanilla transactions. This has got stuff in it, and my favorite ice cream is the Ben and Jerry's Cherry Garcia. So I said, this is not vanilla. This is Cherry Garcia. I said that's essentially how the name came up. But I just needed a name because one of the things that you typically do is when you're writing a paper, you have to give it a name and say that, my system. You can't keep saying my system
Right.
because
Right.
it looks very kind of boring in the
Right.
paper. So you say the Cherry Garcia system, and then what happens, you give it a name, and then you might even shorten it down as a CG. In CG, we do this, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the reason I did it. But
Yeah.
the way it came about was basically just accident, and
Well, it's
I
stuck.
could
So it's
and
good.
yeah, and I didn't end up changing it because it stuck, and
Yeah.
I didn't think of changing it
I
after
think
that.
it's an excellent name. Yeah.
Thank you.
A little bit of, like you said, not just vanilla, not just a vanilla database, just, hey, it's vanilla plus whatever else you want. Right. And I think that implies that. What was the catalyst to come back to Silicon Valley?
Well, actually, the we had just 2008 was a crash.
Yeah.
So the entire world had really was reeling from the effects of that 2008 crash. And Australia in particular had taken a real beating. And so businesses in Australia were not doing really well. Um, and so the job situation in Australia wasn't great. So I had begun working with a startup, and I just begun working with a startup in Australia, but it wasn't going particularly well for me. And so I said, hey, given the number, it became a numbers game. I said, if you look at the number of companies that are there and number of opportunities, the number of opportunities in Australia are relatively small.
Yeah.
Uh, some of them were really good. And the quality of people, there was no question about the quality of people. There were really great people there, right? There's really great technical minds. But at that point, the opportunities were relatively low, and I think it was mostly because of the effects of the 2008 crash.
Yeah.
And so I decided that, hey, if we're gonna, I mean, if I have to do something, why not go and work on a startup? Because I had this thing about doing my own startup at some point. It's been there for a while. And so, like, I tried to do that in 2008. I tried to do that in 2003. I tried to do that later. And so in 2008, in 2014 or 13, I decided that, okay, we need to figure out what to do. And I said, maybe Silicon Valley is the place to go. So I
Yeah.
decided that. And so I worked for this startup called Platfora. I ended up joining Platfora after coming here, which got acquired by Workday later. Uh,
Yeah.
so, you were at Workday as well.
I
So
was, and I was there when we acquired Platfora. Yeah.
correct. And so I did some good work at Platfora and then worked at another startup called Awake Security, which was
Yeah.
in the network space. And then while I was one of the things that kind of bothered me was that being I was looking for a problem to solve. I said, see, hey, if I'm going to solve a problem, I need to know what the problems are.
Right.
And I thought, let's go back. And I had never worked in actually I'd worked in building systems. I'd never worked in using systems that much, right? So I thought I should go and look at how people use data systems and database systems and things like that.
And this is interesting because you didn't go in it with a blank slate going, hey, I'm going to solve this problem. You actually probably, because of your work experience already and your PhD, you probably have seen all these problems. And so you went with a mind that is, I would say, experienced, right?
Yes, it's not that. So the thing was, I was looking for problems to solve.
Yeah.
And so that's why I said that I should go to a company which uses these systems. And Visa was a very large company, and they were one of the people who use a lot of software of different types, and they have a lot of very very difficult problems that they need to have solved. So I thought it might be a good place, and I was right. Like I ended up learning a lot at Visa. 3.5 years at Visa that I spent, I learned a lot about many many things. And one of the things that's most important for any startup founder or anybody else is, why will somebody buy your product?
Mm,
There is more reasons than just that it has feature XYZ. There's
sure.
a lot more to it. And those are the things that I learned at Visa. Right? There are other things that people look at. And
Yeah.
so that was actually a life-changing experience for me as well.
One of the final questions I want to ask you is the trend of data and the future of data itself. Where do you think, how do you think data is going to evolve? And what do you think the future holds for data itself?
Well, that's actually a very, very important question, particularly at this time, at the time when, there's so much focus on AI and Gen AI in particular, and this whole uh, promise of AGI and everything we're hearing today. Um, the most important thing I'd like to say is that uh, I think data is critical for any application, whether in the past or in the future, but it becomes even more important today because at the end of the day, you're going to have to make decisions based off the data that you have, whether it's current or past data. The quality and the consistency of that data is really important. Also, the availability of that data is important. The ability to be able to have consistent, high quality data available so that you can make decisions, because the decisions you're going to have to make are going to be based off of automated systems, things that have learned about different aspects of your environment. And so as we as we move towards this automation, this automation that's going to affect every single aspect of our life, the quality and and the availability of high quality data is going to be critical. And that's, I think, why databases are going to become even more important than they've been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we take data for granted, right? I mean, we don't, I'm writing something about this, but we don't, as people, think about where the data comes from. We just access our applications and it's there. But the key is if it's incorrect, but if it's there,
Think of
that,
if you are going to rely on an LLM or some sort of a neural network that was trained on data that's not accurate,
yeah.
or that's wrongly labeled, or if you have or it and then you build an application that and you build an application that relies on data that it's acquired from, let's say, a sensor network that is not current, you're going to have issues. Let's say, for example, I was talking about the weather app. If you have a weather app that's delayed by 3 hours, is it going to be helpful? Or if it's based off of a prediction that wasn't properly, that doesn't have proper input data, it would basically not give you the kind of um, predictions that you're looking for. And we make decisions based off of these things, even though we don't realize it. Like you would pick an umbrella because your weather app tells you to it's going to rain.
And I know you mentioned this offline, which I thought was really important, was the weather app could tell you that it's going to rain and the AI will provide you with an umbrella.
Yep.
But once, as a human being with context, you step outside and you see that the sky is kind of blue. There might be a bit of clouds here and there, but you know it's not going to rain. You don't need that
Yep.
umbrella.
You don't need an umbrella. Exactly.
Right.
So, but take that to every aspect of your life. You know, we're gonna have cars which are highly automated. Maybe not full self-driving yet, but we could get there soon. And so every single thing you can imagine would depend on high quality data
Yeah.
and consistent data. So
I mean,
I think
yeah.
all the research that has gone into databases and data systems um, over the many years, last few decades, right? Or maybe 50, 100 years. Um, it's all going to, we're going to need more and more of it. It's going to be, and the thing is, it, we're going to be able to live with less errors and even less amount of errors. So it has to become even higher quality.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at healthcare data, you look at, mathematical data, right? I know there's an example out there that I saw where somebody was asking a popular AI engine if 9.11 is
Mhm.
bigger than 9.4, and it chose 9.11 as being bigger.
Mhm.
And of course, you could train it to learn that, well, 9.4 is actually a larger number. But, those are some of the errors and hallucinations that we're seeing in AI right now.
Yeah. And I mean, uh, but again, I mean, that's why the whole RAG space, for instance, right? The whole retrieval augmented generation space. I think is going to become it's going to become a very important part of uh, of our life in
Yeah.
various aspects. And if you look at the augmentation and the retrieval part, it basically involves data and databases. So it doesn't go away.
Akon, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing with us your stories. Now comes the fun part where I ask you several quick questions.
Oh, that'll be great. Yeah, looking forward to it. Go ahead.
What is your favorite food?
Well, actually, uh, there's a there's a dried fish called Bombay duck. There's a fish called Bombay duck. It's called bombil, or I think there are yeah, it's found in the seas around India, and I believe elsewhere as well. It's called something else in other places. But essentially, it's dried, and then the dried fish is cooked with different parts of the country do it in different ways. But I grew up in the west of India, and my family is from the east. So whenever my mother made bombil, essentially she would use the spices from the west, but she did it in a technique that was from the east. So for instance, in the place where I grew up, you get they use a lot of coconut and
Yeah.
things like that in the chutney or in the spice. But in the west, in the east, we use mustard oil to cook. Like mustard
Yeah.
oil is used as a cooking medium. And so the two things brought together is a different and unique taste that my mother used to make. And so I remember that.
Yeah. So
Uh,
is it a fried fish, like a deep fried fish, or is it fried and seasoned?
so it's like an eel actually.
Okay.
It's a very small thin fish which is dried. There's a
Yeah.
very strong smell. If you make it, your neighbors will know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of an acquired taste to some degree, but
Okay.
it's known to have changed some of my vegetarian friends to non-vegetarian. So it is that.
Oh wow.
It is
Okay.
that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But that with bombil, the way my mother used to make it, and with some hot rice,
Yeah.
just that's all you need. And
Okay.
it reminds me of childhood.
So I know you're living in the San Francisco Bay Area now, but can you get that here?
Actually, you do get it. But the thing is that um the spices and the preparation, the method of preparation isn't the same, so it never quite turns out the same.
Okay.
um So unfortunately, yeah, but yeah, so that's it. That's what I miss.
Second question I have for you is, what is your favorite song?
Um, so it might be weird for people, but growing up in India, I grew up in this sort of cosmopolitan uh, environment, and we had a teacher who came in from Canada, and he used to teach us a lot of English music. And so there's a song by John Denver, Country Roads, which
Yeah.
is something we sang in the class. He used to bring out his guitar, and we'd sing, and it was part of one of the songbooks that we had, the school
Yeah.
songbook. So we'd sing that song, but the thing is, the song itself, for instance, it has something about misty taste of moonlight, teardrops in my eye. I didn't know what misty taste of moonshine, teardrops in my eye,
Right.
right? And so I didn't know what moonshine was, right? I came to know what moonshine was after I came to the US. But
Yeah.
but it that song kind of takes me back to my school days and
Okay.
my hometown where I grew up.
That's good. It's like certain smells bring back memories, certain songs bring back memories too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
And one of the other questions is where is your favorite city or place to visit?
Um, I I like I like walkable cities.
Okay.
Um, I've been to, like, I like Sydney. I used to like Pune when Pune was not Pune was a very nice city.
Mm.
But I've visited London just twice, and fortunately I've visited in reasonably good weather. And I found that um, over the last 5 years since I visited last, I kind of I like it very much. I like the walkability. I like the history behind the place.
Yeah.
Uh, the food. There's a lot of different food from different places. There are a lot
Yeah.
of interesting things to buy. There's a lot of history, and there's a lot of craftsmanship. People, buying and selling things that have been made with a lot of care and tradition. So I kind of like London very much.
And there's a lot of good, nice old architecture there.
It's nice old architecture and a lot of tradition and a lot of um they're boot makers
Yeah.
and suit makers and people who make different things. There's
Yeah.
family traditions that go
Yeah.
back. So
200-year-old pubs, stuff like
so
that. Yeah.
things people taking pride in what they've done for many, many years, two
And the
generations.
and the metro is pretty good there. I mean, you get
And
around.
travel is nice, yes.
Yeah.
Travel is nice. It's easy to get around.
And the final question is, what is your favorite word or phrase?
So I think um, what really keeps me going at times is I thought about this when you sent me the questions, and I said, "Now, what is it that I think about?" And I often tell myself is that things worth doing are usually difficult or hard to do.
Mm, mm.
Just, you know, just get it done. Just do it. Get it done. If
Kind
it's
of like
doing
the story you told us about your PhD, your journey to getting your PhD. Yeah. Okay.
if things are worth doing, they're usually not easy. Otherwise, anybody would have done it.
Yeah.
So do it. There's pain involved. Just get
Yeah.
through it.
I think it helps build resilience too, and a little bit of discipline as well.
But also, you'll appreciate it more.
Yeah,
You
I think
feel
you
good.
would. Yeah, absolutely.
You appreciate what you've been given.
Akon, thanks for coming back. We had some technical difficulties earlier, so we couldn't record the final part of the session. But just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us. And it was a tremendous pleasure having you here and wonderful hearing your life stories and your take on data.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me, and it's good to get back and talk about stuff that I'd like to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to catch up with you again. Hopefully in the near future, we just released our latest ScalarDB release and would love to talk to you about stuff like that. And your opinion on where we're headed.
No,
And
I
yeah,
I'm actually excited about some of the stuff that's come in. So I think it's right on track, particularly with the whole AI, Gen AI, and RAG type application. I think uh, it's headed in the right direction. So I think the things to be excited about.
that's wonderful. That's good to hear. Yeah. Thank you very much again. And have a wonderful week.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.